Please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back to Omegon 2. Today we're going to be looking at a video from a F1Nnster Twitch stream. F1Nnster is a reasonably successful Twitch streamer, and also by extension, thought in the top 0.1% of OF for that matter. I believe it makes them one of the most popular trans women on the platform. Certainly enough discussion I noticed concerning the amount they could potentially be making on OF because of their status. They have opinions and perspectives concerning gender-affirming care, which is where we're going to be focusing our attention today. As I do not align with their beliefs, I am also acutely aware that they possess a significant following on Twitter, Twitch, and obviously they must have on OF. Thankfully, I don't care how big you are on any platform. When you say something I don't agree with, I'm going to tell you.
Could you imagine if F1Nnster is your fucking estrogen provider? I'm working on that.
So this is one of those very odd points I've seen some make on social media, that if they could, they'd start their own pharmaceutical company, their own provider, delivery service to help the youth. There's an issue though with this, and that is to introduce such a idea, a concept, you would have to disobey the law of the land, or to be intentionally, willfully ignorant of it. Which is often the case with those that don't understand why governments introduce very strict rulings when it comes to certain types of medication. Yes, hormone replacement therapy falls well within this after all. That level of regulation comes from years of study and examination, and then depending on the government's intention to, let's say, appear good optically, optics are important after all, they will choose to enforce those recommendations from scientific experts or not, depending on how it makes them look.
I've wanted to set something up that was similar to GenderGP, but a non-profit, something that doesn't take any money out.
Owing to my lack of limited understanding concerning organizations like that, would it even be possible to run something without taking money out of it?
Now, this is something I really want to get involved with. I think I've found some good people to do it with, and we're actually beginning trials really soon. I'm not going to be able to say what it is for a while.
Is that because there's a chance this might not be entirely legal? You show your hands too early, you spoil the surprise, somebody reports you to a relevant governing body, and they get involved and you get screwed. Because that's always possible when it comes to what you intend to pursue. And what you intend to pursue is something that might not work in whichever country it is you reside in. Especially not if you're in the United Kingdom. Even if the government changed, it would be bad optics, which it's likely it will change. It will be bad optics for the new government to come in and immediately change the gender-affirming care rules that we have in place.
But what I can say is there's an email in the description because we're looking for any EU or UK medical doctors who want to be involved in trans healthcare.
Now that's very interesting because UK medical doctors there's a bit of a shortage of. It could be argued they're even mythical at this point. Additionally, it'd be very risky for them to get involved knowing their medical license, if they went against the UK law, could be revoked as a consequence. If you hear any light tapping in the background of my audio, my Cavalier Sizzles has decided that the teeny tiny moth, clearly Mothra, must be vanquished by her Queen Ghidorah. Back on topic though, EU doctors. EU is not a country, but alright, we'll entertain that notion. I really wish people would stop calling EU what it is, or treating it as if it's some kind of sovereign state. You really should reference individual nations, especially since in the EU right now there is a rise in right-leaning populism that would certainly stamp on this very quickly. Finding anyone that could be a sympathizer to your cause could for them be risky and also bad optics.
If you are in the EU or the UK and you are an MD able to prescribe medication to people, send me through an email and I'll forward it to the right people.
I am now curious. Are you intending on setting up an organisation to help adults or children? If you intend to help children, UK doctors cannot prescribe certain medications. UK law is quite explicit on this when it comes to gender-affirming care and medical treatment. It was the right move on the UK government's part, a rarity for the Conservative Party. The EU is slightly different, depending on the individual nations. I know the EU does like to lord over the other member states, but to me, they're individual sovereign nations. I'd rather treat them as individual than as one large Ponzi scheme, which is often how I've looked at the EU these days.
It was made at 2:58 p.m. and laid before Parliament at 4, and it was passed. And so now this becomes a real thing that's actually happening. This isn't just like a bill in America where like, oh, maybe it's going to get voted. No, this is a real thing that is happening.
There is a massive cultural difference between how the politics of the United States, the politics of the United Kingdom, the politics of the EU, and the politics of each individual member state of the EU operate. In America, it's very much typically done down party lines. However, it was quite amusing to watch Biden's Build Back Better plan completely fail in the Senate because two of his own decided, no fam, this doesn't work for us because of what you've inserted into it. In the United Kingdom, it is heavily debated, goes to the Lords, usually comes back, debated more, it takes ages. In the EU, because of language barriers, many don't actually know what's going on, so they vote on whatever they think they're voting on, not knowing what they're voting on. And the individual member states right now, some are calling for elections because of how fecked they are. This gender-affirming care bill is the correct way to handle, because far too much negative has happened because of what we now know as a consequence of many young people's lives. The damage and harm done to them because of an inadequate system that does not help them as they grow into young adults. Because when it comes to transitioning, it should be an adult mind and an adult body making an adult decision on an adult future, not a child mind on a child body, or an adult coercing a child to transition or forcing it. We've seen too much of that as well, something which I cannot support, ever.
On the 3rd of June, what this dictates is that now it's officially going to be completely illegal for under 18s to have access to gender-affirming care.
For the most part, this is correct, and I also support the government in this. I have been quite clear when it comes to children, and I think my previous comments stand the test here as well. A level of consistency. I firmly believe that while we should be helping children as they grow up, we should be making sure that every step of the way, every single avenue has been explored. And this becomes quite invasive for them. I understand that that might not be preferable. But to be certain you do not regret and you do not wish to go back, or you do not wish to cause harm to yourself or others, one has to be certain. This is not something we should just throw drugs at, or transitions at, operations at. This has to be done properly. Tavistock showed us where we went wrong. We must learn from that. You wanting to set up some non-profit to help children? No. Which explains why you've kept some of it in the dark.
Ban. So, it specifically states in this that even if you're on a private... The NHS won't do it. That was already a thing.
It had to be a thing, because the NHS needed to remove itself from further liability, of which there was plenty. The legal cases against Tavistock, the only gender-affirming care clinic in the United Kingdom at that point, were mounting up, and the majority of them were going to end very painfully for Tavistock, understandably and rightfully so. They forced through transitions that should never have happened. They were not there to help those detransition. In fact, many of them didn't actually perform their duty correctly and simply just gave you what you wanted and moved over to the next person. The private sector should also take note of this because they themselves would want to be removed from that level of liability. The risk is very high, after all.
But now you can't even have it on a private prescription.
This might be unpopular to some, especially supporters of F1Nnster, but I support this completely. Over the many years I've been on YouTube, I have held this position from the beginning for 9+ years on Omegon, and I will maintain my position on this now.
This is in the exceptions paragraph. So, like, you can still get these drugs, but only if you're not transgender.
So I took the liberty of looking up the article you are citing, the statutory instrument paper, that comes into force or came into force on the 3rd of June and runs up until the end of the 2nd of September for 2024. The points you are citing define certain conditions that have to be met. For example, condition A, which is the very first thing referenced, is that on the day the private prescription was issued, the patient in respect of whom it was issued was 18 or over. Condition B applies if the prescription was issued by an approved UK prescriber. Condition C applies if the prescription was issued by an authorized prescriber who is not an approved UK prescriber. The exceptions cite that Article 3 does not apply to a sale or supply in pursuance of a private prescription, and these usually centre around when the prescription was issued and the treatment commenced. For this to be applicable, Condition A has to be met in a way, and the same applies to Condition B. Condition C is also cited within this, and I'm going to link it in the pinned comment if you're interested in reading the 8-page ruling, law, whatever you want to call this. I might do a separate video on this in the future if anyone's interested. Let me know in the comments.
So anyway, a bunch of kids are gonna, which is really fun.
How is that any better to those who harm themselves because they regret what they did? Or to those who change their mind and want to go back and don't get any level of support? Who are socially vilified for realizing that this was not for them? You melodramatic twerp.
I don't think anyone really knows what to do about that.
I don't think you do either. In the context of governments, they don't either because they only ever want to do something that makes them look good, as opposed to helping people. Helping people is something many use as a way of saying, but I like my local community, vote for me and get me in power. The moment they're there, you're forgotten. The wider message has to be pushed, and as long as they look good in the process, that's all that matters. It's why on Moisky Live I've been chuckling at the UK general election because we all know Labour are more than likely going to win, but let's face it, none of their positions are remotely feasible. But they'll try it anyway to look good.
And quite frankly, everyone in the group chat for the charity is freaking the fuck out, because a lot of the people that run these have trans kids.
Late, Kappa. What
so
did I miss?
There's not really a solution to this. I wish I could come in and say this is what we're doing about it, but we don't have a idea.
I guess since the bill expires in September, you can wait until then. Patience usually pays off, but I'm sure you will spin that to say, ah yes, but in the interim, the 3 months in the middle, the risk to lives is far too high. I would say the risk to lives is much higher for as long as you are unwilling, many in fact are unwilling to accept that children should not be pushed down this path or put on this path. It needs to be an adult mind with an adult body making a very much permanent adult decision. And there are many adults who change their mind too, by the way. Just because you know those who are medical professionals with trans kids does not change that reality. The statistics, the data does not help you right now. Simple as that.